My name is Ian Morris, and I'm from Listening to Smile, and you are listening to Music Fit Radio.
Before we jump in, I want to give some flowers to today's guest, Ian Morris of Listening to Smile and my creative control. Ian is one of the original gangsters of direct-to-fan creative independence. Long before creators were talking about ownership, niche audiences, or niche for my American friends, and building outside the algorithm, Ian was already living it. What started as a deeply intentional music project turned into something wild. Over 10 straight years of releasing an album, a full album, every single month. Think about that for a second. That kind of creative output doesn't happen without systems, discipline, alignment, and most importantly, creative control. This conversation goes deep into what becomes possible when artists stop chasing the machine and start building a sustainable creative life around their actual values. Enjoy this one.
And the last thing I wanted to mention is Ian was so kind to send along a track, so stick around to the end of the conversation and you're going to hear some of his very powerful music. Let's get to the show.
For people who don't know you yet, who are you? What's your background in music? Who is this Ian Morris caricature that I've known for a few years?
Yeah, well, I'm just a connoisseur of music, man. I love so many different styles of music, and I was just fortunate enough to grow up in a household where I was subjected to a lot of music. You know, everything from like John Coltrane and Miles Davis to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin. You know, it's just a lot of different varieties. And so for me, music is my passion. It's like everything that I live for, you know, live, breathe, and eat it, you know, on a daily basis. You know, it's for 10 years, I devoted an album every single month for 10 years. And so it just gives you an idea of kind of the dedication to the craft, and what I've sought to do was just to grow through those experiences. So I'm the founder of Listening to Smile. It's a unique sound healing company that really specializes in music licensing for holistic functional practitioners. And so, yeah, it's just kind of, it's what I'm working on day in and day out. It's my passion. So.
Yeah, dude. And I mean, we've had multiple, you're returning champion of the podcast here. So it's like, I've gotten to know you through Listening to Smile, and we've talked briefly about where it all began. And the thing that's most interesting to me about where that project came from and how it was born is how consistent you were for so many years, and have been. So it's something when you look at the examples nowadays where you get these like 30-day beat a day kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, I remember my first beer. Why don't we get a glimpse into what Listening to Smile, where did that begin? And talk to me about consistency with that project.
Yeah. Well, I think it started because I was hosting events in person, you know, sound baths, and I was playing instruments live, you know, didgeridoos, peepaw, the U-chin, ukulele, the guitar, you know, singing bowls, tuning forks, all the whole thing. And I just started noticing a lot of turnover on people coming to those events. And I would also attend other sound healer events, and I would see kind of the same thing. People would come 2 or 3 sessions and then they would kind of flake out. And so one of my musician friends, I just asked him, I said, dude, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Just tell me, how come you stopped coming? And he was like, man, I'm just going to be honest with you. He was like, singing bowls, it's a note over and over. He's like, once you've heard it once, you've heard it. It's like, okay, I'm good, you know? And so I really, because he's a musician, it's a little different than just an average listener who's going for meditation, but I really took to heart what he said. And I was like, started really deep diving on my thoughts of what makes music meditative and what makes it functional for those types of settings and situations. And I started thinking about Bonnaroo, Burning Man, and all these experiences that people go to, and they spiritual and emotional and creative experiences, and they come back and they're telling their small town or their hometown, you know, man, I was there for a week and a half, and you know, they're just going off on this experience, and no one else is really matching their vibration. And I think that's where I really dialed in. I was like, that is what I want to create, but not so chaotically. I want to do it in a subtly epic way. And so that word, that phrase, subtly epic, became something that really stuck with me. And I wanted to create an experience in person that would allow people to have that experience, a spiritual, creative, religious experience with music, but then they could take it with them, something that journeyed home with them. They could purchase it. A lot of the singing bowls experiences, they don't translate the same on tape, and you'll hear that a lot. And like, there's certain bands that perform well live and they just have this energy, and it's hard sometimes to capture that on tape. And so I was thinking, like, how can we really make the first effort, our first focus into creating a recorded experience that then can be shared pre-recorded in a live setting, and then really focus on the experience of the individual, focus on the experience being taken away from not just this experience, but something that they can use to inspire a daily practice of shifting consciousness, shifting mindset. And so that's really what gave birth to it, that whole idea of like creating an experience. And then from there, it just kind of grew into adding human design, astrology, and kind of channelers, and like making them a part of coming up with the themes and creating an album that was in alignment with the monthly energy. And so that was the crazy commitment that I did that made me go into making an album every single month, so that it was in alignment with the astrology and the collective energy.
And how many years?
10. Yeah, this is the 11th year. Yeah. So it's wild.
Dude, that is just like, when we talk about the C's, one of them that comes up is consistency. Another is connection. And I mean, from what I have learned of you and in our budding friendship, is you are so connected, dude. You are so connected. You are so consistent. You're an engine. You're just an absolute machine. I can understand, and this is why it ties in really, really nicely with what we're doing over at Music Fit here, and that's why I was so happy to like hear of the new project, is that I can only imagine that vibe of music wouldn't really fit the traditional music model. What were you seeing that wasn't sitting quite right with you?
Well, I think just that artists weren't able to make a living at all. I mean, the venues had a lot of victimization that they were passing on to the artists, that we were having to jump through hoops to work with venues and live, and that wasn't untrue with yoga studios either, like going into the yoga studio experience versus a bar, like playing as a band. And so there was a lot of people passing the buck, the streaming services, the venues, the promoters, the marketing. There's artists I know that spent $10,000-$15,000 on marketing and had absolutely no return on anything that they put money into. And so you start seeing everyone pass the buck. Everyone blames everyone else for why it's not working. But it was plain to me that it was just not working across the board. There was no one that was really getting results unless there was a payola from millions of dollars from record labels that wanted it to be seen. I just started having conversations with myself. There has to be something different, and it's not going to be on the same path or the same outlets that are providing this existence. And so, I loved how Bandcamp allowed you to price your work and put it out there relatively easy. And I liked how I could come up with a direct-to-consumer distribution and put my catalog in a privatized state, and then allow that to actually make income and to build courses, workshops, and the conceptual albums monthly into a licensing for affiliates. And it really separated myself from the musicians. And I think the biggest standpoint was to really separate myself from music as like iTunes, Spotify. And I think that, in my opinion, it's what artists need to do more of today, is to separate themselves and realize, like, even though you might not be doing niche music like I am, you have a niche, your fan base is a niche, and like to treat that as such, just as much as I treated the meditation market as my niche and the practitioners as my niche. Your fans are your niche, and they have a specific thing they're looking for. They're coming to you for that. So now, how can you take that off of the track rails that are, guiding you to nothing, and create a new destination?
So do you feel that that's probably the biggest, I guess, misunderstanding for most artists about the whole streaming culture and monetization right now? Just the fact that they're not just throwing music out into a void, but they actually have to find a very specific demographic of people that will be their fans.
Yeah. So the only way I can really relate this from my world, right, is like meditation. If you are talking to a new practitioner that's wanting to get into doing guided meditations, a lot of them will start, in my opinion, will start and have this generalized approach. And I'll say, my suggestion is that you get very specific about what it is that you do. And they would say things like, well, I don't want to exclude people. And I said, no, you most definitely want to exclude people. You want to cut out the people who don't need to be there, because you're going to make a lot of headaches for yourself of people who want you to be something that you're not. And so by cutting out those people from the beginning, you're already getting to where you're really getting to the meat and potatoes, of what you're wanting to do. And so I think, like, yes, niche, in my opinion, boutique and niche and, micro communities, I think are going to be in the next 5 years, especially because the way everything is getting centralized. I don't think a lot of musicians put a lot of thought into the infrastructure of what distributes their music to people. And once they have, the elusive they, once they have that, where there's just very few options for you to reach people, they're really dictating and controlling your life and your livelihood. And I think that the more that you can do to separate yourself from the system, create micro communities, micro connections, what I have seen in my experience is that those will tenfold give you yields and harvests that are unlike anything that you see on the mainstream level.
Yeah. Dude, and that's direct connection to what we're establishing inside of the MFL, that decentralized thing, even as far as leadership. And when we start to approach business like that, man, we open up so many doors. And this is actually a really great segue right into your current project. Like, was there a specific moment where you realized you needed a different system to help more people?
Yeah. Well, so I always loved vinyl records and like conceptual albums that you could open up and they would have artwork and things that you could read and dive into and just explore a universe of creative art and music, poetry, books and websites and videos. And so I missed that interaction with that multimedia experience. And it's probably because I'm older and most people are just used to, streaming MP3s. But that experience, that tangible experience, I created something what I called an expanded experience. So it was a companion to my albums each month. So inside of those albums, I would put the write-ups from the channeler, the human design expert, and the astrologer, so that my fans could read what was going on for that month. But then they also had videos that they could watch, and we even had a vault tapes, which was kind of like unreleased things, and even the practitioners talking about the energy, so you could listen to audio from that. So you had this whole experience where you got this album and then these external experiences to dive into to learn more about the creative energy. And so I just loved it. It was so much fun to create a universe for people to explore. There was hidden links. Every image was clickable. You could go into it thinking of like an escape room and a scavenger hunt put together into a document that was in a digital world. It was digital and it would be viewed like an app or a website, but it was an experience. It was something more than just streaming the music. And it was really meant to establish a connection between the artist and fan again, instead of letting Spotify dictate that erasing of the artist in that process. So when I did that, Dr. B, who he's produced Alice Coltrane, Michael Jackson, DJ Quick, India Ari, bunch of really famous people. We had a conversation. I saw him on Instagram. He has a thing that he's developed called music medicine. I created the thing that I trademarked, frequency-minded music. So we just had a conversation about what he's doing and what I'm doing. And it just led into a really interesting, where we started a company called My Creative Control, and control is spelled like the control button on the keyboard, like CTRL. But basically that started because he wanted to bring this experience to people in the industry that he's working with. So we've been having some conversations about developing experiences for some pretty high level people. I can't drop names yet, but there's some really neat people that are planning to work with this. And we're working currently right now with Dr. B has a physical book, a digital audio book, and an audio album digital that he's putting out. And we've created an experience that people can go through to, be subjected and experience enhance the awareness of all the things that he's been creating. Yeah, it's something that was a lot of fun to do the research and development and kind of the trials and the last 4 years, and then to develop it to a system and a platform and then move that to where now other people can partake in it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I try to describe it to my friends into the community. I'm like, think of like choose your own adventure digital form. And when you showed me the site and just the some of these pieces, I was like, what on earth, man? Nobody even knows what vinyl is. Nobody understands that. And while we're on the topic, like, what was your favorite kind of conceptualist album? Like when you get it and you just put it in your hand and you just got to go through it. What was that album for you?
And that's tough. When I think of that, like when you said that, the first thing that came to mind was like some of the Led Zeppelin albums that, had the rotating wheels and, just the interactive parts. And like, so I think back, like when I was first listening to music, and I think definitely like the Beatles, some of the Beatles albums and the like Sgt. Pepper's, when you pulled that out and started, getting into that, but definitely like Houses of the Holy and a lot of different Led Zeppelin, albums that were just really, really cool with the artwork and just the concepts of how they put together photo, and then the photo evolved through the experience of the artwork and the album, and it's just very, very cool stuff.
Yeah. To me, it really connects like so much more than just a music. Because many of us as artists, that's a big blanket term. Like I play around with graphics, I play around with physical media, I play around with photography, I play around with writing, I play around with all of these different creative outlets. Music is one of them that I would say is my primary, but they all kind of like sit under that. So when you can put a whole package together, it's, as an artist myself, it's just something that I'm really proud of, where it's like, this is really cool. And maybe there's like, hidden songs, even that type of thing. That was the coolest thing. The first time I remember like really being impacted by like a hidden song that I was not ready for was on the Blue album by Third Eye Blind. Darwin, the song, it comes like 3 minutes after.
Yeah.
That is bonkers. It's so cool. That type of thing I think has been lost with the streaming game. And I'm really, really happy to hear and dive in. And one of the questions I first had was like, okay, is it different than like your typical link in bio page?
Yeah. So what we really focused on is graphics heavy. So it's like a visual experience first, and then the functionality is built in around the visual experience. So all the images are always clickable. They're leading you to new experiences. So there's a lot to explore in these documents, but it's also not overwhelming. So what it's doing is an image that would just be a placeholder for eye candy before now has a function to it. And it can be hidden password, password protected hidden link. It could be something that takes you down a rabbit hole that's completely just a companion piece to the music, but it wants you to experience a conspiracy theory, or it wants you to look at a new book title that just came out, whatever that the artist wants you to know. Or sometimes it actually links directly to their social media, their YouTube, their PayPal for buying an experience, or a payment gateway. So there's just so much you can do. There's games, but I would say the biggest thing that makes it different is that there's less scrolls. If you look at today's websites, 87% of people are taking in content through their mobile phone. That's a huge number, right? So all the websites are laid out first with the focus of desktop landscape, which then it's forced to a portrait. And if you look at some of the desktops, they look great, but then you go to portrait and you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. We try to make our experiences where it's about 7, maybe 10 scrolls, but maybe 7 scrolls, and there's a lot of information there, a lot to explore, and it's just a lot of fun. So it's a completely different format, and it's begging for engagement from the viewer. It's really wanting to have a fun experience again. It's inviting that fun playfulness of a child into that experience.
I think that's a huge part. Now, being the skeptic artist out there, like somebody sitting there going like, cool, what does that do for me? Like what happens? What actually changes for an artist once they start owning the relationship directly?
Well, I think there's so many artists who, it's interesting because you and I both are, I'm a poet, a musician, a visual artist, painter. I do web design, all kinds of graphic design. So when I make a piece of music, I already see images in my head. And I think what's interesting is if artists started getting more involved in that process, even if they're not directly doing it, but having more of a voice, I think our platform is really begging for artists to take their power back. So it's called My Creative Control, meaning that you have these skill sets that are shapers and movers of reality, but you're letting other people dictate the energy behind how that's being conducted or distributed. And you're really missing out on a lot of the power you have as an artist. One of my friends who was a street artist and amazing poet and artist, and even with a little bit of music, Cedric Amoja, I remember him saying that the last revolutionaries on the planet are artists, are creatives, because people who are not owned by the system actually have an independent voice, and they have the ability to have their own independent press, whether that's music, poetry, or visual art, that they can influence consciousness with. And I just thought that was such an amazing statement.
I absolutely love that and very much agree. And that's a huge philosophy. And when we talk about that too in Music Fit, especially in the MFL, that's the whole point, is to give that artist the ability to live a sustainable life on their terms, not energy dictated by somebody else. Maybe it's a label, maybe it's a streaming platform, maybe even at a basic level, people don't consider it, but the algorithm, like you're allowing, it used to be like, I've heard this numerous times in the last couple of weeks. It used to be social media. Now it's interest media, right?
Yeah.
Because based off of anybody in the world is going to get it. If you are eating a burger and a milkshake, somebody who likes burgers and milkshakes are going to get it, not your friends. How many times have you been on a social media platform such as Instagram these days where you don't see anything? And as an artist, how frustrating is that? You've built up this following, you're posting, and your own people in your own city that are supposed to go to the shows aren't able to because they didn't get the message in time. How frustrating. Let's turn it into, how does this tie in? How does My Creative Control and creative control in general, how does that tie into sustainability for artists in your eyes?
Yeah. Well, so this isn't just limited to distribution. There's going to be 3 paths. When a person comes into the app, there's going to be paths that they can take, choosing. So there's products and services distribution, that you can take that approach. There's also an approach that's like an artist portfolio and like a digital business card, so that you use it strictly for engagement, awareness, and promotions in a different way. You're not eliciting sales. You're going for more of an awareness and connecting and networking aspect. And then there's another one that's the experience, which is basically doing something that's more playful, engaging, and a game almost that they can interact with in real time. So there's different things that they can do. So by doing that, like when you, as an artist, you can look at, I can create as a visual artist a virtual invitation that goes out just like a static, like a IP, like they're logging into like a website or an app. And so then they're able to interact with that. But that experience is going to be given to interact with the exhibit in real time, live, right? So you're looking at something digital coming to the tangible experience in person. And that just gives you an idea that makes something, because it's a little different. The viewer can say, I've heard about this art show. This has got this interactive component. I'm going to go check this out. And it's a way to get fresh blood into an experience and try to capitalize on more fans, getting more diversity coming in just from something that is just a little different, but also just being able to take control where you're really doing what it is that you want to do. Dr. B and I were talking to an artist on the phone, and he was talking to us about how the record label wouldn't let him release this album because they felt like it wasn't controversial enough to make sales. And he was saying, I don't really care. This is from my heart and my soul, and I want to put this out and touch people and reach people. And so these types of experiences, this distribution platform is going to allow people to take that control back and to realize that there's a lot of power in this that we've been told that there's not. But the reason that there is that it's misleading, because that allows the industry to control, and that, things are not always as they appear, I'll just say, Sometimes sales don't reflect, like you think about Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. It's one of the most definitive jazz albums of all time. A lot of people say it's a cult classic, that it started a whole new generation of jazz music. But when it first came out, if you looked at the reviews, they were horrible. They had nothing to really substantiate sales, and it was just not doing well. But over time, it was so minimal and crisp and just new that people started embracing it, and then it became this classical album that shaped jazz music in general. And it's just interesting because the industry is always going to clash with innovation and sales, marketing and what's marketable. But as artists, I think there's something more than the greatest hits. There's so certain fans out there that are going to interact with your B-sides and just have this religious experience, and it was meant to be that, and that's all it needed to be. It didn't need to be a number one hit that made you millions of dollars. It was something that connected and reminded people that they're human again, and I don't think every one of our songs is meant to be a hit. I think that we're supposed to explore being an artist and develop our styles and explore new things and not be cookie cutters where we have to put out the same album over and over again. But I think that we have to take control, because now we start dictating to the listener how it's going to be. You know what I'm saying? Like going back to Third Eye.
Going back. That's our new goal here. You're only allowed to speak in riddle or Third Eye Blind lyrics. Okay, please.
Yeah.
What's one thing that artists are chasing right now that you think matters way less than they think?
AI.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Dude, I have not been able to get out of a single conversation on this show in the last year not discussing AI. Should have suspected. Let's dive in.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Explore it.
Well, I mean, AI is a great tool. I'm not here to bash AI completely, but what I'm trying to help people understand is there's two things. First thing is it costs hundreds of millions of dollars of fundraising to put these things together. The amount of resources it takes to sustain it, the data, and then to be able to put the teams together to the maintenance and, just upkeep of what's happening with. And so my question is, why would you start the first and foremost place with art and music to just demolish the already struggling community of what we have labeled the struggling, starving artist? Why would you take hundreds of millions of dollars behind you and start here and not start in corporate, not start in medical, not start in the places that are actually going to make you money? And so if you ask yourself that question and you really are honest with yourself, you're going to come to the conclusion that it's to squash the independent press, it's to squash the independent voice, it's to change the landscape so that there's more control and the power of companies and governments more than the artist. What do the artists know? They don't know anything. They shouldn't be sharing their mind. So my point is, that's the first thing that I try to get people to really look at. And the second thing is that culture, art and culture have always clashed. Art has been here to be a subculture from the beginning. It's always to create new perspective, to shake up what the feeling in society is, and to go against the grain. But when you look at the very nature of AI, what it's designed to do is to give you the middle ground, the conservative approach. Like you'll even see when you search sensitive topics, I can't give you that information. Oh, really? Well, I thought you knew everything. Why can't we have this now? So my point is that there is a real control mechanism behind AI. And if you realize that you being an artist, no matter what, like someone could say, well, Ian, you've created 200 albums in the last 10 years, and someone could go on AI and create 200 albums in a week and then go start selling it. And I'm like, but it's different. I was like, because they're not going to have a person that shows up that has made the music, that has experienced all of the research and development and the experiential time with all of these individuals in different countries, and be able to learn what has actually taken place in that process and to apply it in a real world setting, a certification, a workshop, an interaction where you're interacting with those people. And so again, you come down to, it's still going to give you the middle ground of what everyone else likes, the commonality amongst the cream of the crop. It's not giving you exactly what you want. And then there's an element of it that's the slot machine. hey, can you make me a picture like this? And it gives you 27 pictures that are close to it, but not just not exactly what I asked for.
Yeah.
And I said, do you think that that's not manufactured? Like every time you're putting in that request, it's costing you money. And so, it's like, why not just learn how to develop it? And not saying don't use AI. I think AI is great for a copy tool, and there's different things that you can use that really help independent artists. I grew up dyslexic. It's been a huge tool for me. I love being able to utilize things with copy or talk to text, or different things that help me be quicker than what I would normally be. And I think those are great tools. So I'm not bashing it completely, but I just want people to understand that I seriously doubt, I'm not the end all be all. I don't know everything. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. But what I will say is, I don't see the sustainability of being able to do this long term. For the amount, I grew up doing IT, and I know what those data centers are going to have to change chips and processors and different things every couple years. The amount of upkeep for the amount of centers that they're wanting to bring in, and you're already starting to see communities say, hey, get that the hell out of here. We don't want that here. It tarnishes the water. It's not something we want here. So I'm not saying that AI isn't going to be a part of our future, and I'm not saying that AI is not a good tool. I'm just saying that as a musician, as a creative, I really think that there is a lot of value in your personal, heartfelt, emotional response and outpourings that can be utilized into these niches that we're speaking of, and these opportunities that we're speaking of, to monetize it in a way that is completely outside of the system as we know it today.
Dude, perfect roll into to where I wanted to go with this. This is brilliant. Take that artist. They're likely, if they're anything like me, they go to chat. They go to, it used to be Google, it used to be a friend before that, and they would, because they felt stuck. What would you recommend if an artist feels stuck right now? Where should they start?
We do these workshops that are creative writing workshops to help people have breakthroughs. And I'm not even talking about creators. I'm talking about people who've never wrote a poem, who've never done artwork. They don't consider themselves a creator. And I'm a really big follower of Neville Goddard. I absolutely love his work and the things that he put out into the world. And he said that I am, before any statement you speak of yourself, like if it's I am broke, I am tired, or I am rich, I am abundant. He said the I am is the spell. It's the magic. It's what God gave you to create an amplification. So he said, use it wisely and realize that those words, I am, and whatever you follow it with, are going to be the most creative output that you could ever do, much more than a brush or a instrument or anything, right? So it starts, I think, in mindset, and to realize, like, part of taking your power back is to stop letting other voices infiltrate your creative space that you're using, your canvas, your landscape that you're using to create your pieces. And so one of the things that I tell people that have never created anything, the deterrent is that you're afraid it's not going to be good enough, or that there's going to be judgment or ridicule from other people. So if we can help them to create something without them feeling like they did it by themselves. So what we do is we have them co-create in this workshop with Spirit. We get 4 books. The books come down. We get a notepad and a pen, and we say, okay, I want you to flip open to the first page, the first word that jumps out, write it down. We're going to write down about 20 of these words that you come to. And I said, don't cheat. If it's murder, death, write it down. I don't care. Whatever word pops out to you first on that page, write it down. And so we have a little circle at the top of the page, and we call it a word palette, just like a paint palette, but it's words. You're going to paint with these words. And so they don't choose these words. They're not invested in these words. Okay. So then what we do is we say, now, like refrigerator magnet poetry, I want you to take these words and rearrange them into a title. And so they do that. They rearrange it into a title. And so I said, now you have a title that you just co-created, just like you would with AI, right? Except you're not invested in this. So I said, if this is bad, just blame Spirit. Like, I was like, because you're just here, you're not in the driver's seat. You have to surrender control. And so this is a co-creation with you and Spirit. So then people that are writers will get that title, and they'll just, it's like it because it was dropped in and not something that they had to prefabricate or think about in any way. It hits differently, and it allows them to roll quicker with it, because it takes that that responsibility off of that engagement. People can write whole poems this way. People can just piece together. And I'll even tell people, don't use all the words that if you have things that come from your head, add it to it, co-create with it. It's a living, breathing experience. And so by doing these experiences and these workshops, it's like the breakthroughs that happen are unbelievable. And so any artist, they'll say, well, how do you come up with your names of all your albums and your songs? And like, how do you constantly create? And I said, because I got rid of worrying about what people think, and I got rid of realizing that I'm not doing this by myself. Like it's a co-creation, just like this workshop, just like the page and you and the book. And it's like all of these different things. Somebody put thousands and millions of hours into the development of the computer that I'm now using, this evolution to bring this tool that's bringing all of this music into the world. So it's like there's so much that we're doing in co-creation that we don't even think about. And so if we just let go of that control and that responsibility and just realize, let's have fun like a kid and explore. And I think that is where you're always going to find your best work, is where you stop giving a fuck about what's happening with anyone's judgment or, anything. And so that's the first thing. And then as far as the industry, I think that you just have to be crazy enough to, like, everyone's going this way. And it's like, well, not many people going this way. Let's go this way and see what happens,
Mad Max it. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. That's it, dude.
So I think those are the two things I would say.
It so much resonates with everything you're saying there too, is because we have a similar process. It would be awesome to have you in the group to teach that specifically. So that's one of the biggest pieces that we run into. We get together, it's pick a theme. And I think what you were saying there, said another way, how I've explained it, is because it's different than detachment, because detachment implies that you were once attached. It's more like an unattachment. Something comes in, you're writing about it. It's kind of like how one of my mentors explained when he tries to get his kids to go to bed. He goes, hey kids, look at the clock. What's the clock say? And they're like, 9 o'clock. What's that mean? What's the clock? It's bedtime. It's not dad saying that, it's the clock. So it's like an indirect way of allowing yourself the freedom to just fuck it up. Like, because it's not yours, you're not married to it. It wasn't even mine. That's not mine. I think we get married to our ideas and they're babies, and that's one of the reasons we don't release. I think that's one of the reasons that when we do release, we don't promote, abandon, or surrender to just letting it just be. As soon as it gets out, you've done your job. I think that's where you get hung up on. So I'm so happy you hit on that, and I love that process. I want to touch in on something that I know of your history as a former ball player. The athlete mindset. What would you tell an artist who's looking to build their career and not wanting to burn out? Did you see any parallels between your artistic career, your athletic career, and how one maybe managed energy better and didn't burn out? Because I think we're in a fight to the finish line, which is actually just a brick wall in many cases in the creative space. We don't have the same kind of systems to actually allow for us to build a life worth actually living. So do you have any insight toward that?
Yeah. So if you look at a lot of the athletes that are on a professional level, you're looking at true refinement of self-care, because they know it's vital to the evolution of their sport, their craft. So they typically have better sleep. They have a lot of regiment around food and eating and workout and movement. But you see in that world, there's a lot of lack of joy. There's a lot of lack of doing things that brings happiness to them. And so it's interesting because you'll see players like I remember hearing about like Dennis Rodman and some of the parties and things that he would go to. And you see like this, one of my friends called it the beast. Like he was talking about like addictions and different things of like artists and even athletes, that they have this absolute regiment, and it's so militant that there's no room for joy. And so he said that the beast will always, whether that joy is like, doing something to sabotage it, but it's going to make you take those instances to have those joys, because it can't just just be locked up for your whole entire life. And so I think like what's interesting is that both of those worlds, I see that there is like a lot of artists have that freedom and that expression and that joy, but there's very, very little self-care or, regiment or even thoughts given, awareness given to how sleep impacts their body. And that's why you see so many musicians dying early, overdosing, having these horrible health conditions as they get older, because there's not a balance. And I think if anything, both of those worlds, those industries could learn from each other, is that there's a lot of creative expression and a lot of joy that could be added into an athlete's life that might not be there. I'm not saying it's like that for everyone.
Yeah.
But and then in the musicians world, I know there's some fit musicians as well, but I would say as a whole, that industry is not taking care of itself very well. So if there was a way for those things to come together, like Music Fit, then it's something that's really helpful, I think, for people to see that balance and what it could actually achieve by doing that.
Thank you for the plug. Holy, that's exactly the point. And I started getting that after mutual connection of ours and friend and mentor of mine of Paul Check was. When we talk about Dr. Happy, we talk about the athletes that I was working with. I agree with you, man. They were not happy. They did these things as a form of punishment. They had the shit talk. I remember being on a ride even in speed skating. This is later, never mind the hockey career, but in the speed skating career, I remember being on a ride, cycling ride. We're going up a hill, and I'm hearing this guy from like the front of the pack just swearing at himself. You're such a fucking idiot. What are you, a fucking pussy? Just like berating himself. And I'm sitting there going like, I kept by him, smile on my face. I was one of the weird trainers that was like, okay, so when you squat, that's not helping you. Smile. Like, just let it go. And we brought a lot of the creative, artsy-fartsy stuff into training. And guess what? People got better results. They learned more. They had better cognitive retention. Everything happens with play. Play is 100% the secret drug, that and sleep.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Putting those two worlds together makes what I would consider a pretty whole, unique, creative, ambitious human being, like unstoppable, undeniable even. And I think you're a great example. There's no human on the planet that I would put up against you, and nobody comes close to your consistency, dude. 10 years, give me somebody who even comes close to an album a month for fucking 10 years. I don't even know. That's athletic mindset. That's like that. I'm driven on it, but you were still having fun. It's your lifeblood, man. That's the thing that brings you most joy. You wake up going like cartwheels out of the bed for it. People don't do that, especially in the sports world. So I think there's a lot of value there. Now, segue into like wrapping it up here. With my creative control, is that for every artist out there? Who's it really for?
So right now we're just starting with invitation only. So it's that whole rigmarole, right? But the reason is that we want to start and build it to something. We believe that we really have something here. It's been a lot of fun to develop, and we really want to take our time and work with artists that are 100% committed to that focus of the tangible, experiential, and delivering direct to consumer. But it's something that we're going to grow, and I'm hoping within the next year we'll be able to open it up to more artists. But what I'm looking for in the beginning is we're looking for people that have communities, whether that is like Paul Check's community or but it can be anything from an author, a musician, a poet, just a creative person in general, entrepreneur. So we're looking for people that have communities that want to bring these experiences to play with their communities. And while it earns value and it also earns income for them, but it also gives them a distribution outside of the traditional models, and it gives them they're in control of the experience. They get to customize it 100%. And someone asked, is this all AI? No, it's not. We're going to use AI when people are wanting those tools. We have them, we know how to use them, but we're really wanting to focus on more of the human experience and to create direct to consumer experiences that are relating back, that are having that tangible synergistic expression between the creator and the fan or the client.
Love that, man. Where can people find your work and connect with you?
So there's listeningtosmile.com. That's the first, first website. And then the second website is mycreativecontrol.com. So yeah, so control spelled like the control button on the keyboard.
CTRL. Yeah. I love what you're doing, dude. It's really, really great. And I think what you offer, I like it a lot that it's invite. I like that it's got this, it's going to change the game. I know that. Like I just, and you're just like, yeah, this guy's the OG. If Ian's doing it, I'm telling you, this guy, he's the only guy. I'm just so fortunate you made the time here to speak to me about the new project. I'll make sure everything is in the show notes for folks. Any final thoughts for artists trying to navigate this all right now?
I just think the community that you've created with Music Fit, and then also the venture that you guys are doing with the community aspect there, is what people need to be plugging into. I think the doing it by yourself is, I've done it for, 20 years, and I'm just telling you, it beat the hell out of me. So, you might as well face the facts that we're going to get further together than we are by ourselves. And so there's a lot of opportunities now. People realize they can only know what they know and they can only do what they do. And so we start putting together these expressions and these skill sets. And as long as there's heart and there's open communication, I feel like it's always going to be a win-win. So I'm just encouraging everyone to find their home, their community to work with and start creating these universes together.
Thank you so much for sharing your love, your energy, your light, your time, everything. Thank you so much, dude.
Thank you, man.
Right.